Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This film, another one director special by Mike Newell, who was interested in bringing out the public school vibe of Hogwarts, complete with the long hair, student culture and cliques, I think is most appropriate for the subject matter of this action-packed teenage tale. Apart from the new director, there was also a change of composer which works to rejuvenate the mood a little wee bit, I reckon. And yes, John Williams is inarguably sensational. However, the change to Patrick Doyle and later in the series to Alexandre Desplat, I think steers the series in the highly appropriate direction of music over the top of the film which makes you feel what the characters are feeling, rather than watch as a spectator what they are doing. Considering how much is in this film, it's a miracle we still get to feel the presence of all our favourite characters, despite all the Triwizard tournament tasks, World Quidditch Cup match, Yule Ball, Voldy encounter and whatnot that has to be included. So the film kicks off to a start which shines a light for the first time on the connection between Harry and the Dark Lord through the opening dream. Which if that isn't enough to convince you that things are going to get really dark really soon, then I don't know what will. And we see for the first time Harry's Voldy connection face, which not surprisingly and very welcomely gets better over the following films. As the Weasley clan, with adopted Hermione and Harry, portkey their way over to the Quidditch World Cup, and we experience a succinct, condensed, yet not at all unmesmerising Quidditch World Cup, I can see why this marks the start of many viewers getting their knickers in a knot about the series. However, please hold your horses and be reasonable. Films are a different art form to books, and while the translation between them has been picked apart and criticised for as long as the crossover has happened, because they are different, they come with different restrictions. One doesn't have a length limit, and the other, in order to be made at all, very much does. I know some of you might eye-roll your sockets out for me saying this, but just think, we don't throw off at paintings which depict a scene from a play or a novel. We understand that they're a different medium that not only can only show so much, but shows the painter's interpretation. It tries to capture what was in the text, but works within the confines of the art form. So that's my little 2 cents on those book bums, who I think verge on being a tad unreasonable about the films not including every little detail and storyline from the books. You can like the books better, of course, most people do, but let's just all appreciate what this film is about in its own right. Okay, but back to the Quidditch World Cup. One thing those who have read the books might have missed is that for a smidge of a second, you do actually see Winky, or at least a Winky potential candidate, riding on a llama or camel that passes the screen seriously fast. And not long after that, Harry's, literally this time, I love magic moment, comes in the form of their TARDIS-like super cozy tent accommodation. Now, one obvious parallel, which is only more subtly shown through costume in the later films, is the Death Eaters' parallel to the Ku Klux Klan. The pointed hats, the burnings, the love of so-called pure blood is a pretty spot-on inspiration, I'd say, and especially later in the film in the graveyard scene, where they stand in formation around the Dark Lord, the similarities are most definitely there. But before we depart the World Cup and head back to Hogwarts, I reckon Delivered by Barty Crouch Jr. is in serious contention for the most epically delivered verbal spell in the entire series. Speaking of Crouch Jr., in the trial scene which Harry visits in Dumbledore's Pensieve, I detected a bridge between the many fashions of Albus Dumbledore. Dumbledore's suit and waistcoat get-up in the second Fantastic Beasts couldn't be further apart from what we find him wearing in the Philosopher's Stone. However, this courtroom scene garb provides a transitionary link to the traditional wizard cloak look from that tight-fitting muggle grey suit. But hop, skipping and jumping to the welcoming feast, the arrival of the Durmstrang and Beauxbaton students and their water droplet hats. There are 2 things which, annoying me, would love to point out. But first, when Durmstrang are entering the hall, look out for Filch's expression as they all flood past him. It's a golden moment. But back to my observations. First of all, Dumbledore has his speech printed out in front of him when addressing the students, which I know Michael Gambon's memory was starting to fray only slightly around this time, but I think this emphasises how tricky and actually lucky they did get with the casting of Dumbledore, considering that he's about 116 when he dies, and so you have to find the balance of casting someone who looks like an appropriate candidate for that age bracket, yet still got enough gusto in them that they convincingly play the part. And the other little thing which is amusing to notice is the as much of a close-up as possible that happens on Barty Crouch as he explains the updated Triwizard Tournament rules. Because of his hand acting that would be a bit weird to cut out of the shot, his head is slightly cut off to make the tightest close-up possible. Then Moody pops in to say hi, and the ridiculous range of Defense Against the Dark Arts teachers becomes pretty apparent. I mean, seriously, is it even imaginable Lockhart having a conversation with Moody? After Harry's name is regurgitated from the Goblet of Fire, and everyone in the school pretty much turns their back on him, thinking he cheated for the sake of attention and fame, there are only a handful of unwaveringly loyal people who stick by Harry, being Neville, Hermione, and Professor McGonagall. Neville's attitude to Harry reminds me of how I felt in school half the time, where I felt told by the student climate of the time to feel a certain way towards a certain student, while on the other hand having only experienced perfectly pleasant interactions with that person, creating a rather conflicting place to be in. Therefore, I think we can say that Neville is a better person than all of us who've experienced that little conundrum, as he just does what is right, aka remain friends with Harry, despite the attitudes of the students around him. Other really relatable teenage feelings come in the form of Ron's
piss off
to Harry, which is a real teenage mood. Ron's panicking and hatred of how he looks before the Yule Ball, Hermione not knowing how to maximise her curly hair potential. I've been there. Hermione's seriously smooth and sassy delivering of the line,
I won't be going alone because, believe it or not, someone's asked me. And I said yes.
finding odd ways of describing things like Harry's apparent moral fibre to be humorous as the Weasley twins do. And lastly, Harry's use of Ron's word
mental
to get back in his best friend's good books. Classic. In films 5 and 6, Ginny's wardrobe is seriously wonderful, with the hand-sewn hoodies and knitted beanies. I'm a fan. But while for the most part teenageness is depicted so well in the film, maybe it's just a magical phrase we muggles had never thought to use, but the line,
"Hey, my eyes aren't glistening with the ghost of my past,"
is something I find really hard to believe came out of the mouth of a 15-year-old, no matter how articulate they are. Harry's ordeal working out the clue that lies inside the dragon egg is a sequence I never stop finding funny. From Cedric telling him,
"It's not a bad place for a bar. Just take your egg and mull things over in the hot water,"
which is delivered in a more of a date invitation than a pointing Harry in the right direction tone, to Myrtle trying to peek through the bubbles to see Harry's weenie. It's a great scene all round. Also, there's a great line you might have missed where Myrtle asks Harry about some polyjuice potion she could have swore she saw, to which Harry says,
"Kick the habit."
speaking of discussing things that are hard to swallow, how hard does gillyweed look to pop down the hatch? Steamed spinach is hard enough, but a loopy, slimy plantweed in one large go is enough to build a lump in your throat just talking about it. But finishing up with the maze and the last chapter of the film, where Filch once again has trouble firing the cannon at the appropriate moment, and Harry's exasperated noises tally hits the triple digits. Seriously, between being crucioed, having his arm severed open, and the crying over Cedric's body, there's a lot of it. I always think when Wormtail cuts off his arm that he really doesn't have that many fingers to spare. He already only has 9, and then boom, that number's down to 4. But that new Silver Surfer type of arm that he gets as a reward, as told in the books, is not all rainbows and lollipops. It kills him in the end for betraying Lord Voldemort, which for anyone who's seen the second Fantastic Beasts, makes me think that the tongue Grindelwald fashions for his escapee assistant guy, Abernathy I think his name is, might not be just a selfless good deed from one pal to another. Voldemort's appearance is pretty consistent throughout the last films he's in, despite his nose becoming flatter and his ultralight clothing changing slightly over the course of the films. The first silky garment Voldemort wears when he comes back really doesn't hide his Adam's apple at all, which when you notice it, it starts to make him look not at all scary. A tip for those watching with young people who need a little way of getting through it without being traumatised, I suppose. I don't think I'm the only one that thinks that despite Harry's unconvincing crying effort over Cedric's body, Cedric's father's wail from the gut more than truly makes up for any emoting that's below par. When in doubt as to whether a morning scene is going to be affecting for the audience, this scene kind of suggests that you just need to make sure that the animal noises box is ticked, and you'll be good. Another random thing that crossed my mind upon watching Barty Crouch Jr. after transforming back into his normal self is that scene could totally be used in some health propaganda for ensuring populations are getting enough magnesium. A sign of magnesium deficiency, if you didn't know, are those tingly muscle spasms in your thighs or wherever in your body you might be familiar with. Crouch Jr. gets like the worst case ever of that happening all over his body. So eat your legumes, people, I think is the moral of the story. With the message from Dumbledore at the conclusion of the film that
while we may come from different places and speak in different tongues, our hearts beat as one.
The message of the importance of friendship comes through. Voldemort having not a single loyal friend or rather follower come greet him when he returns contrasts enormously to the concluding scenes at Hogwarts of the students saying their goodbyes and exchanging addresses from faraway places. So if there was one theme that came across in the Goblet of Fire, I would say it's friendship and Voldemort's lack of. Although friendship is definitely a theme throughout the entire series, so I don't know. Anywho, that's me done on this film, and now on to what I know you might be thinking. What the heck did I find in the food department that isn't just slimy gillyweed? Well, I did find one recipe Honeybunches that isn't just a desperate dig for material, but a seriously good recipe that tastes insanely good. So let me now share that with you in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, but vegan. Hello Honey Bunches, so it is in this scene that I found a whole stack of like Yule logs, chocolate, Swiss rolls, chocolate sponge swirl cake type of things. So what would you know? I've whipped that up. This took me like 3 goes to master, and that was a lot of broken chocolate slab weird stacked things that didn't swirl and hold together. But I've mastered it and I can't wait to share it, so let's go. The wet ingredients in a bowl. First mix together the coconut sugar, mashed banana and apple puree, just so the sugar is evenly distributed. Then you want to add aquafaba, maple syrup, some oil, vanilla, and the aquafaba is what makes this really flexible and not break, and actually really hardy in the whole rolling up situation. So baking powder, bicarb, some plant milk, some salt, some apple cider vinegar. Bam, a little reaction, fizzy whiz will happen before your eyes, super cool. Yeah, so it's a 1 bowl thing, which we all appreciate, I'm sure. Then you want to add your flour. I added gluten-free, almond meal and cocoa powder. You could swap it for plain flour if you fancy. Then whisk it all together until ultra smooth. And then you want to grab a baking tray, not a pan. You want this to be thin, and yes, this will be like disconcertingly thin, but I promise you it will be fine. If you spread it out into the corners of the size pan I mentioned on the blog post in the link below, it should be about, a centimetre thick, a third of an inch type of thing. Let it cool for 5 minutes when it comes out of the oven, and then I just use a rolling pin to help, but you could just do it without that. And you roll it up into like a big snail shell and let it finish cooling completely with the baking paper all wrapped up inside. So don't worry about that. We're just getting the shape, used to the shape essentially. So meanwhile, while it's cooling, make your filling, which I use natural Koyo, some Tafuti cream cheese. Whip that together with electric beaters until stiff and whipped type of thing. And then you want to add some maple syrup and some vanilla. And it's a great, delicious filling that seriously holds its shape. And yeah, I mean this looks complicated because of the whole swirly thing, and I feel like it's complicated because I've had so many fail whales with this recipe, but this final one isn't actually, it's really quite simple. So anyway, this is finished cooling completely. You'll see that it's not breaking when you unroll it. Just be gentle of course, but like it's hardy, it will survive. So then you want to spread all your creamy filling onto it, and then you just roll it away from the baking paper. You don't want to roll it up with the baking paper in it this time. Yeah, so just roll it up gently, leave a bit of space around the edges so the cream doesn't spill out entirely, although I could have spread it out a bit more actually. Then once it's in a nice swirly whirl, then I put out some Glad wrap, and this was the trickiest part, but it wasn't even that tricky, just transferring it onto that and wrapping it up in plastic wrap. This is so it doesn't dry out, and then I just sealed up the ends like a bonbon, so it's nice and airtight. And then you put it in the fridge to finish chilling, and it will not solidify, but firm up into a very sliceable Swiss roll. And I finally got use out of this plate. Woohoo! Perfect size. So refrigerate it for like minimum 3 hours. I did overnight. Then unroll it, and yeah, you'll see that it's quite a hardy little brick of a thing that is great to like tidy up the ends of if you want to serve it for people. But if you're not fussed about that, then you just do you, and then sprinkle it with like cocoa icing sugar or some chopped chocolate as I did. And yeah, what a win! Yay! I know this is kind of like you wouldn't know this recipe unless you saw it in the film, but I can't wait to make this and bring it to like things that you bring food to in future, because it's quite a statement number and it's free from so many things, which is super cool. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that one, Honey Bunches. Thank you so much for watching Honeybunches. As usual, the link to the recipe on my blog will be in the description box below. And I'm super excited for the next one, Honeybunches. It's going to be a real treat. I'm super excited about those recipes and talking about it to you. So I will see you super soon in the next installment. Hope you're doing super well. Bye!